Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem at any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.
Our compound was a big, dusty triangle, buttressed on every side by a levee of compacted soil and rubble. The winter house, set toward the southern bund, was up on stilts and airy. We had good storm-proof sheds, and our grow houses had retractable cowls that my parents had designed and perfected before I was born. Across the yard, a low parapet of sandbags and a simple A-frame portico marked the entrance to our summer hab, a cluster of cellars and underground cisterns all interlinked. The plain was mostly red dirt, spinifex and gibber. From the veranda of the winter place, you could see the distant sheen of the Gulf in the east. Behind us, like some mummified leviathan, the long buttress of the range lay between us and the open sea. This was all the world I knew, and for many years, it was all I needed.
Tim Winton is the author of 30 books. His work has been widely translated and adapted for film, television, stage, and radio. Today, I'm talking to Tim Winton about his latest novel, Juice. Tim, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Juice confronts us with a post-apocalypse, barren, ash-covered landscape, salt plain, thorny mulga. You've written about all of that before, but there's something quite surreal about the landscape depicted in Juice. Where did you have to go to discover that place?
Well, I certainly didn't have to travel very far from home in a geographical sense, but psychologically and intellectually, yeah, I had to go into a sort of a potential future based on our current trends and policies, where the science is suggesting that we'll end up if we don't take serious and radical action to adjust our impact. So yeah, it was. I guess I was embodying the scientific modelling in terms of what life would be like for my antecedents, or my descendants, in a radically altered world. I mean, some of us in Australia already live in an extreme environment where all the animals are on and plants are on the range of their extremity geographically and climatically. And the idea of pushing that out by a few more degrees. In northern Australia, we've already just survived a winter where winter temperatures were in the 40s. And we're trying to keep our global temperature, within 1.5 degrees of heating from pre-industrial temperatures. We're currently on a trajectory for 3 degrees, and some are saying up to 5 degrees of extra heating. So in that sense, lots of parts of northern Australia in particular will be uninhabitable, and you certainly won't be able to be above ground for, quite a lot of the time of the year. So in that sense, that's where I had to go psychologically and intellectually, and dare I say it, artistically, to try and imagine a possible world that I would dearly love to avoid for the sake of my grandkids and their kids and grandkids. So it's a kind of, if you pile on the extremities that the scientists are saying on top of the extremities we're already having to contend with, it's a frightening prospect. Yeah, it was not an easy thing for me to embrace and to spend 6 years psychologically in that place of more and more extremes.
Juice could be a lament for the catastrophe that might already be upon us, but there are many positives to recognise in this story too: our capacity for compassion, for community, and our shared humanity.
There's no question that, we keep talking about this chaotic climate of the future. Sadly, that, it's already with us. We're seeing the beginnings of that. I mean, 500,000 people are already dying every year from heat-related illnesses. Millions of people all over the world are already sort of climate refugees traveling to not just richer places, they're traveling to safer places. And a lot of the conflicts that they're suffering, in their countries are, related to climate and also related to oil conflict, or resource conflict. So yeah, I mean it's a bleak prospect, but people and I guess part of what I'm embracing and part of what I've discovered, but people will still be people in a bleak future. They will still have personal problems, they'll still have family issues, they'll still be recognizably people. It's just that they'll have to contend with things that we don't have to. And so that, if you just turn the dial, everything is harder. We're already in a position where we have a declining fertility rate, particularly in the West. When everything's hotter, that's, fertility for all animals and plants gets difficult. So yeah, it was a hard thing for me to go to as a parent and a grandparent. But in a way it was an attempt to face something that is too easily evaded. We just turn our gaze and we don't want to think about that because it's too hard. But I think that evasion has sort of cost us a lot, and it's reduced our capacity to have an impact on the future. The last 20 years have just been, wasted. The wasted years as they're called, when we had a real chance of making serious inroads into climate mitigation, and we just pissed it up against the wall, basically. This all sounds very bleak, but I'm not a person given to despair, and I'm not in the business of marketing sadness or despair to anybody. So if there's an element of a lament for a possible future, yeah, that's true. But you do your grieving in advance, and then you set about fighting to make sure that doesn't come to fruition. In terms of my activism, that's where I'm taking the fight. That's where I live. But for the book, it's also about showing people refusing to give up. It's about people looking for other people to survive with, and to remain civilized with. Technology won't be the thing that saves us. It'll be human solidarity that saves us. And later in the book, that becomes a bigger element. So it's about the refusal to give up hope. I think humans are incredibly resilient. And what makes us resilient is not just this sort of physical courage, but it's moral courage. And I guess the title sort of underpins that. There's obviously juice is about, on its surface, it's about energy and the use of energy in terms of, fueling our machines and our everyday lives. But juice is also about courage. And in the book, people are asking themselves and each other, do you have the juice to keep going? Are you out of juice? They keep asking each other. So really what they're talking about is moral courage, not just the energy to keep going, but the moral courage to persist in the face of tough odds.
Your main character, your protagonist, is nameless, and as are most of the characters throughout this book. He's something of an outlier, I suppose. And in the context of your other work, is Juice an outlier?
It's a good question, but it's a frequently asked question. But and perhaps it might look so on the surface, but it looks pretty much of a piece and feels pretty much of a piece with all my work, from my point of view. Anyway, sure, it's set in the future, and that makes it different to some of my other work, which is either set in a contemporary, mostly in a contemporary setting, or occasionally in a historical setting.
It's the sort of thing that brings up terms like science fiction and certainly speculative fiction.
Yeah, let's face it, if fiction isn't speculative, it isn't fiction. Do you know what I mean? So I'm happy to rub that one out. And I don't, it doesn't feel like science fiction to me. And I did love science fiction when I was a younger person. I grew up on Ray Bradbury and Ursula Le Guin and all those people. But this book to me would be recognizable to my readers. It comes out of the landscape. It's about people's relationship to landscape and nature. It's about family loyalties. I don't think it's that big of a step outside my normal preoccupations.
Getting back to your main character, your protagonist, he's intelligent, honourable, pragmatic, increasingly streetwise, although a bit naive. He sounds like some kind of superhero, maybe a quasi mythological figure with an odyssey before him. Is he really a hero?
No, I think he's like all my other characters. He's a flawed person suffering from his own delusions, his own bewilderments, his own limitations. The Like anybody, just when you think you've got a handle on the world, you find out that there's a whole other story going on behind you, and the book has a few twists and turns in that sense. But in a sense, he's a kind of an every person, I suppose. And the person that he starts out to be, particularly, in that passage that I read earlier, is not the person that he ends up. Um, and so, in a sense, it is, as you say, it is an odyssey. It is a kind of a journey from his very small world as a homesteader in the northwest of Australia to being a kind of a world traveller in a time where it's almost inconceivable that anyone would travel the world, but there's no means of transport. There's no aviation. There's no rail lines. So the only cars that anybody has are the ones people can make themselves out of spare parts. So he becomes a world traveller in a very surprising and secretive and, as the readers will discover, quite shocking enterprise.
Your protagonist moves from an existence as a scavenging homesteader to that of a high flying assassin under the command of a secret network known simply as the Service. His job there is to acquit all hands with minimal noise and fuss. That sounds euphemistic at the very least.
Yeah, in the way that all military and paramilitary organizations manage to minimize the actual facts of what they do. Whether you're in the Australian Army or the IDF or the US military, when people get killed, you always find some sort of bureaucratic sort of means of describing their demise and, what you do to their cities and their families. But yeah, essentially, the service is really a kind of a janitorial mission to clean up the world from those it deems to be responsible for the state of the world. And it pursues these rich, powerful clans and families into their strongholds all over the world. And in order to, as you said, acquit them. And writing about that kind of enterprise and the details of that behavior was pretty confronting. And for a pacifist, it's not easy to write that stuff. And somebody suggested to me in a media interview that, it would make an incredible video game. And just my heart just sank. I just thought, yeah, you're probably right in all the wrong ways. Because essentially that's what so many young adolescent men and adult men who seem to retain a big element of their adolescence well into middle age. That's what they're playing. Games where you go into buildings and kill people, and the more people you kill, the more points you get. So yeah, not exactly my intention, but also as the reader discovers the kind of the moral complexities, the costs, psychological and emotional and moral costs of that enterprise really start to eat into our hero.
The story actually begins when the protagonist and a young girl under his protection are captured by another homesteader, an isolated survivalist who incarcerates them. But what develops from that is an exchange, a conversation, a kind of oral history that fills the gaps, and something that sits very comfortably within your style.
Yeah, I guess it's an ancient form or framing device, whether it's Scheherazade or the novels of Joseph Conrad. A lot of novels are kind of framed within either a conversation or somebody telling a story because they feel the need to tell a story, or in this instance, because him and the kid show up at this, abandoned mine site. They look down a shaft and think, oh, this could be good shelter from the weather and from the crazy people who are running amok in the world as it goes off its axis. And he, soon finds out that someone else has had the idea before him and has, as you said, taken up residence in this place. And so he becomes this guy's prisoner. And essentially, the conceit of the novel, if you like, is that he's explaining himself to this other old warrior, trying to, in a way, give him his bona fides, but also to try to get through to him. So at one level, he's trying to tell this story through this long day and night in order to not be killed, to try and explain, why they should join this guy and join forces together and increase their odds of survival in cooperation. All the stories that he's telling are either about his bona fides or ways of delaying his own death or ways of securing a life for the child into whose life he's responsible for. And even if he sort of wishes that he wasn't, because it's not his kid, somebody's just handed this kid into his care. And sometimes he thinks it would have been better just to break a neck and out of mercy, as he calls it. And reduce her suffering, as if she's some sick pet. Um, but yeah, so he's spinning these tales to survive and get through. And as that's happening, we're just learning about him, and on the surface, he's this blank slate. And as he says, for someone who was always told that he never said enough, he does a lot of chirping, you know.
Juice is nothing if not tense and dark, but I wondered if you always had a sense of where the speculative aspect of the story, the what if, might lead you.
Well, I guess it was inevitable, really. Yeah, once you open that door, then you've got to go through. What kind of world would it be? What kind of things would he do? What kind of moral framework does he have? What will he not do? And I think this is something that we have to acknowledge that our environment really does shape us to a huge degree. And I think as Australians, we're not unique in the world, but quite particular to Australia and just a couple of other really obvious places. The landscape has a big impact on our mindset, and the weather conditions have a big impact on your mindset and your aesthetic palette, your moral palette, the kind of range of behaviors that are available to you. So, as a reader, you're watching this guy thinking, what will he do when he's faced with this situation or the next situation that comes on? I don't think he always conforms to an expectation that we form about him. Because he's being educated by not just the physical reality of the world, but the political and social reality of the world, not all of which he understands as a 16-year-old homesteader. And he gets to see, you know, the complexities of the world. He sees how other people are forced to live. He gets to see how other people are able to live because of their family wealth, their, aristocratic origins. He also sees what he's becoming and as this trajectory from being a 17-year-old recruit to a man in middle age, which in his circumstances is quite rare to reach middle age. And if you're a warrior, rarer still. Whether he likes it or not, and I guess whether we like it or not, as readers or as people in our own lives, we're all on a moral quest as well as a physical quest.
And there's still optimism to be found in this book for sure, particularly when it comes to human relationships, to things like community and humanity. There's quite an interesting exchange there in the middle somewhere. Do you think the world's shit? Asks the service. And your protagonist's reply is, I have work to do. I wondered how Tim Winton might respond to the same question.
No, I think the world is good, and I think that people's capacity for good is enormous. I think we are and have allowed ourselves to get into a shit situation, but I think we have both the means and the moral capacity to meet that challenge. And obviously, with 3 children and 6 grandchildren, I'm heavily invested in making sure we do meet that challenge. Because when you've got that much skin in the game, you can't allow the future to be some kind of abstract thing off in the distance, because you know that people that you love and that are going to inhabit that future. So it reinvigorates your determination to make sure that there is hope. Even sometimes when hope feels distant or unavailable, any parent or any citizen, regardless of whether they're parents or not, you feel an obligation to generate the conditions of hope where they don't seem obvious. And history has shown us, and I've witnessed in my own life how in extremis people find the best in themselves and they bring the best out of each other. The opposite is also true, that in extremes people become extreme and isolationist and nihilistic, and we're certainly seeing that in our culture. Scott Morrison was criticised, and rightly criticised, during the bushfires crisis, for being seen to be on holiday in his Hawaiian shirt, drinking daiquiris or pina coladas or whatever in Hawaii. But I think all of us, as a broader culture, could be seen to be hanging around in our Hawaiian shirt, drinking daiquiris and telling each other that we don't hold a hose, mate. But we probably should have a little look in the mirror now and again, because what have we done in the last 20 years? What have we allowed our politicians and corporates to do in the last 20 years to change that? We're all a bit too comfortable.
Tim Winton, it's been great to talk to you, and thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you.
I've been talking to Tim Winton about his latest novel, Juice. It's published by Penguin Random House, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading Podcast was brought to you by Book People Gift Cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.